And we are live. Welcome to the MLB Deeper Dive. It is Friday, September 10th. I am Josh Engelman. I am joined by Adam Scher. We have 13-game MLB slate, I think. I'm doing the math correctly. It's not important. We're going to talk about every single game on the slate, whether I said that it was 11, 12, 13, 14. We're going to cover it all. But before we do any of that, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, then go to Awesemo Odds, subscribe there. Then go to Awesemo Fantasy Football, subscribe there, do all of that good stuff. Notification bell as well. Tons of content, even more shows coming up after us. It's going to be a good time. And shout out to Jock Market for being the presenting sponsor of this show. We'll touch on them in a little bit. But first, Adam, how are you?
I'm good. Another baseball slate to talk about. One day closer to football season, real football season starting. It was nice to get actually a pretty good game last night, even though it didn't go particularly well for me. But always nice when like two sports are going. You can kind of focus on two different things and not get completely tied up in baseball, which can be really, really stressful.
Yes, mid-September baseball could be a bit of a problem too. So it's nice to at least bounce around. And honestly, because football is here, it's nice that we didn't do this show 4 hours ago together. Obviously, I assume you did it earlier today.
Yeah, I did this morning with Greg.
Well, look, talk about an upgrade. Now you get me for the deeper dive. It should be a very much increased experience for everybody else. We got a lot to talk about. I have not really looked at this slate all that much, so I am pretty excited to dig into it with you. We're still waiting on a little bit of news. I know we got Tyler Alexander as the Tigers pitcher relatively recently. That's not who I had when I first started prepping this slate. We're probably one more pitcher too, I think, that has not been announced. Am I correct?
Yeah. We got Coonrod with the Phillies, still waiting on a pitcher for the Mariners. I think it's supposed to be Marco Gonzalez, but hasn't been confirmed.
You said Coonrod's starting for the Phillies. I saw Matt Moore again as like the potential long man. Does it even matter to you in the grand scheme?
No.
Okay. I mean, I guess it kind of does for me, because if it's Matt Moore, I'd like whatever team they're playing just slightly better because he sucks.
Yeah, but
that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, but he's facing the Rockies.
Also true. Well, is my crunch done? Have I stalled long enough? Close enough. We will dive in now, Adam, if you are ready.
Yeah, I'm good.
Bang, let's do it. So, kicking it off, your Orioles against the Toronto Blue Jays. The Orioles have a 3.4 run implied total. Blue Jays 5.6. Chris Ellis and Robbie Ray. We'll start on the Robbie Ray side because he's pulling 29% ownership on the last run that I saw. Might need to grab an updated one, but either way, going to be heavily owned here. How are you feeling about Ray?
Yeah, we have him at 31% now on DraftKings, but also very far and away the highest top two pitcher percentage at 29%. We have the next closest, Carlos Rodon, at 14%. So I think the ownership's deserved. He is priced up to 10,700. So it makes it a little bit more difficult to get him into lineups, especially on this slate where there are a lot of bats to pay up for. But at the same time, it's a 13-game slate. You're going to get plenty of value bats that you can go to. There is value pitching that you can go to as well. So I think Ray is clearly one of the top options. The matchup against the Orioles is okay. They do have plenty of right-handed power, but a little bit of a watered-down lineup today as well. No Pedro Severino, no somebody else. Ryan McKenna doesn't usually hit anywhere close to fifth. No Santander. So no Santander, no Severino, still no Urias. So a bit weaker lineup than you normally have. That plays into Ray's favor as well. Austin Wynn's catching in place of Severino. You have Richie Martin in the lineup who cannot hit at all. I'm sure now he'll homer a couple times, but definitely a glove first shortstop there. So pretty good lineup for Ray. And on this particular slate, there is pitching talent, but a lot of these guys have very, very difficult matchups. Not the case here for Ray. We've seen Baltimore's implied run total drop throughout the day as well. So really nothing negative at all to say about Ray. It's just a matter of, how often can you get to him at $10,700? I'm not really going to be upset at any amount. There's no real number that I'm going to look at and say, I would like less Robbie right here.
Yeah, I think the 32% ownership just in a vacuum is a little high, but that doesn't make him not a fantastic option at the top, particularly given this current Baltimore Orioles lineup. Chris Ellis doesn't seem like the guy you're looking for today against Toronto.
No, I don't really think so. He's, I said it this morning, he's one of these guys where typically if the Orioles are promoting a guy from the minors to pitch this year, it's not likely that it's someone that is expected to have major league success. It's more so, hey, you're probably going to help us lose some games. We would like to lose more games. We don't want to burn service time on our actual good pitching prospects. This guy's just, not likely to be a good major league pitcher. He hasn't been so far. Very limited sample in the majors, but a 278 expected ISO allowed to right-handed hitters, 393 expected WOBA. Going up against this Toronto team that just has right-handed power top to bottom, you're going to have probably a cheap Corey Dickerson from the left side, potentially a cheap Jake Lamb. This is a team where there's a lot of different ways you can stack them. George Springer may or may not be in the lineup, but either way, power top to bottom, really good spot. And one kind of overarching thing that, we'll talk about a lot today, with this being a 13-game slate, even the popular teams are just going to be lower owned in terms of raw ownership percentage than on smaller slates. So it becomes a little bit less important to me because at the end of the day, you can say, oh, I think Toronto is getting a little bit more ownership than they deserve. But if you're talking about guys being, 12, 13, 14% owned, it's still not that difficult to make a lineup that overall is contrarian and is, low enough owned that you're happy with it. So the raw ownership typically just isn't going to matter quite as much to me on a slate like this.
Yeah, 6, 7, 8, 9 in the Blue Jays lineup, currently projected for less than 10% ownership. Springer, the only guy north of 20. So you can really mix and match here. And you can mix and match with the team that I have as my number one stack overall. Second in terms of negative leverage, but not really something that I'm super duper worried about for the reasons that you have already laid out. But this is my number one team. Chris Ellis stinks. The run total looks great. There's power from literal top to bottom in this lineup, but there's not a non-power bat available. So I want all of the Toronto.
Yeah, and then also it's a weak Baltimore bullpen as well. And, I mentioned it this morning. I mentioned it on a show the other day when it came up. I'm not choosing stacks based on bullpens because that's just kind of like a little bit too into the weeds for me, I think. Once you get to the bullpen, if you throw 5-6 runs up on the starter, you're not getting the best arms out of the bullpen. And at that point, you're just saying, okay, I'll take my 5 or 6 runs and hopefully we'll get some add-on runs. But the fact that the Orioles bullpen sucks certainly doesn't hurt. It doesn't make Toronto any less. It's one reason that every team against the Orioles always has a high implied run total. It's not always that, people think John Means sucks or something like that. It's that you realize you're still getting 4 or 5 innings from a bunch of pitchers behind him that are even worse. So plenty of add-on run potential for the Blue Jays as well.
Yeah, I have nothing else to say other than Toronto is at the top of the heap for me. I'm assuming I'm hitting F5 on it right now. Top of the heap in the top stack tool by quite a bit. So we are in agreement on this one. Do you get to Baltimore bats against Robbie Ray?
I don't think I get there, at least in terms of full stacks. Again, on a slate this big, most spots just aren't going to pull enough ownership that I really want to go that far away from where I want. I think the best plays are. For example, on a smaller slate, Baltimore has right now they have a 1% chance of being the top stack. Let's say on a smaller slate it's like 3%, and they're getting 2% ownership. But then teams that aren't that much better than them, but are slightly better, are pulling, 2-3 times the ownership, getting 5-6%. On a slate like this, there's so many teams getting 1 to 2% ownership. I don't really want to go to Baltimore instead of them. And then Ray only getting 29-30% ownership right now. That's a good amount. And it would be nice if you roster the Orioles and you knock off 30% of the field, but it's just such a low probability spot that there's not really anything pushing me towards getting to them. And then on top of that, like I'd said before, it's a weaker lineup too. So normally when you talk about the Orioles, you get a catcher with power in Severino, you get a shortstop with some power in Urias, you get Santander who has a lot of power. Now you're talking, Ryan McKenna, Jahmai Jones, Kelvin Gutierrez, you're getting to those guys pretty quick, considering that you can't roster Mountcastle and Mancini together on DraftKings. So at best, you're getting 3 of Mullins, Mountcastle, Hayes, Mancini, and then you're just getting the bottom of the Orioles roster basically as the rest of your options. So I'm more inclined, if I did want to get leverage bats against Ray, just grabbing 1 or 2 of these guys, try and get a home run from Mancini, get a home run from Hayes. Ray is expensive enough that even if he gives up a 3-run home run to Mancini and a solo shot to Hayes, hypothetically, that's probably going to be enough to make it so $10,700 Robbie Ray isn't doing what the people that rostered him want him to do. That is, that is still relatively powerful. I don't think you need to go to the entire Baltimore stack to get that done.
Yeah, I have them 16th, certainly positive leverage because no one's getting any ownership, but still 16th on a 26 game slate.
Yeah, I mean,
slate, rather.
The crunch I did like a couple hours ago, so it's not perfect. It doesn't have updated lineups. It doesn't have our updated ownership. But just to kind of make the point, out of the 150 lineups, I would have played at like 3 p.m. I had an Austin Hayes lineup. That's the only Oriole bat that I had. So definitely not anything of any priority to me here.
All right, we good to move on?
Yep.
Damn. Two-run home runs from the Giants in the span of 10 minutes from Longoria and Brandon Belt. Not that matters for right now, but I just saw it pop up. All right. Phillies and Rockies, 4.6 run implied total for the Phillies and 4.1 for the Rockies. Sam Coonrod going for the Phils to start. German Marquez going for Colorado. No one's going to Coonrod. No one's going to Matt Moore if he's the long guy or whoever the hell comes in. No one's really going to German Marquez either. It's 6,800 with just 6% ownership. Do you have any interest in going to Marquez?
Yeah, I do. I'm a little confused. I said this morning that I thought the low ownership projection on Marquez would come up. I still think it might, but it seems like pretty much everywhere is projecting him not to be bad today, but to just like be a pretty mediocre option. The Phillies do have a 4.7 implied run total here. Marquez has struggled recently. I don't want to read into that too much because it's a small sample size, and Marquez we know is a very good pitcher overall. But over his last 5 starts, he only has an 18.5% strikeout percentage. Again, not a great matchup against the Phillies. The way I look at this though is that I don't really care about any of that because he's 6,800. If Marquez outside of Coors should regularly be between $8,000 and $9,000. So if you're giving him to me at $6,800, you're kind of just mitigating all of those risk factors that I just mentioned. That he hasn't been pitching well. It would be totally different. I'd care more about that stuff if he was priced where he normally is. Then you dive in a little bit deeper and you say, okay, like, do I think there's something wrong with him? Why is he pitching poorly? But if you're just going to knock the price tag down, I don't really care. We'll get to the same point later with Ian Anderson, but. So to me, I think Anderson, at this price point is the preferred option. He projects better pretty much no matter where you look. But Marquez still has a high ceiling here. He's got about a 24.5% strikeout percentage for the season. You're getting him outside of Coors Field. He's not projected for much ownership. And when I ran crunches earlier, when I just made my lineups, he was only showing up in around 10% of the lineups I made too, which makes me think maybe the ownership is actually pretty close to correct. But then once I started narrowing those lineups down and accounting for the low projected ownership, I ended up getting to around Marquez in 25% of my lineups because I think the ceiling is very high. I'm certainly willing to take the risk on him at 6,800.
Yeah, he showed up in 16% of my sims. I would happily get to north of 6%, which is where we have him in our ownership projections. I don't think this Phillies lineup is all that scary. I mean, it is at the top. It's not as much when you get to the bottom. So there's that. I like Marquez. 6,800 is just not the right price tag for it. Let's talk a little bit about bats in this game. Do you have a preference on side? I assume it's the Phillies.
You're muted, or I just can't hear you. Now I can hear you.
You can still hear me? All right.
Yeah.
Do you like the bats in this game, either side?
Okay, yeah. No, not really. The Rockies, it's not a bad matchup going against Matt Moore, but they are very bad, and this is a slate where I don't really see the need to be getting to Colorado all that much. They're not getting any negative correlation against pitching because none of the pitchers on Philly are going to be popular at all. Trevor Story, CJ Cron, you can certainly look to those guys a little bit, but so many other teams to choose from. On the other side, I'd be a little bit more interested in Philly if Marquez's ownership projection comes up, because I do think there's a non-zero chance that there's something wrong with him and that he struggles again here like he has in his recent starts. But right now, with the ownership projection as low as it is and his salary as low as it is, I'm more inclined to just go to Marquez. If that comes up, though, then maybe, you roll the dice on Philly a little bit. We do have them in the middle of the pack in top stack percentage. Most teams are pretty close today, and they're not getting much ownership. So not a horrible spot to take a shot on Philly. They do still have a 4.7 implied run total, but there's teams that I just like a little bit more, especially if Marquez isn't projected for a ton of ownership.
So I do have the Phillies 11th overall, third in leverage. I think there's a little bit of appeal there. There's just going to be better spots. And it will surprise probably no one that I kind of like the Rockies a little bit. And I probably need to stop doing this for some strange reason. But I project whoever's pitching for the Phillies to be not very good. Just right out of the gate. That's also not all that surprising. It's a incredible park for home runs. 110 park factor for righties, 109 for lefties. And while this Rockies team isn't very good across the board, there's a lot of power here that I don't think is like being represented as much as you would think. Here are the expected ISOs, here are the projected ISOs from Steamer 1 through 7 in this Rockies lineup. 193, 239, 245, 192, 164, 168, 201. Nothing lower than 164 is really interesting to me. Those are decent power numbers through 1 through 7. I don't think the Rockies are terribly likely to be a top stack, but I think the things that they can do, just power in general, works today against a shitty pitcher in a good park. That said, the Rockies seem to suck excessively on the road, and I don't know how much that's actually going to matter for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, again, Trevor Story has power. He's fine. CJ Cron, only 4,200, certainly has power. But even those guys, I mean, you look at Trevor Story since 2019, 680 plate appearances outside of Coors Field, 198 ISO, 98 WRC plus. Yeah, 198 ISO is a lot of power for a shortstop, but it's not like Trevor Story type power that you think of. CJ Cron this season, I'm pulling it up now, but I know I had looked at his splits semi-recently, and his numbers in Coors were just absolutely absurd. Outside of Coors this year, he has a 320 WOBA, 99 WRC plus, 166 ISO. In Coors, 446 WOBA, 154 WRC plus, 355 ISO. Just absurd splits for all of these guys. Even the best hitters on the team.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to stop talking about the Rockies then. Do you have anything else for Phillies and Rockies?
No.
Perfect. Get me away from that now. Cleveland Indians, Milwaukee Brewers, 4.2 run implied total for Cleveland, 4.8 for the Brewers. Eli Morgan going for the Indians, Adrian Hauser going for the Brewers. I'm not getting to either one of these guys. The public doesn't appear to be getting to either one of these guys. Is Adam getting to any of these guys?
No, I didn't get to either one either in the crunch I did before the show. I think if you were going to make a case for one, it would actually be Eli Morgan, which really pains me to say because I don't think he's going to be good going forward. But he has so far, at least. Someone mentioned the Zebras. Yeah, those were in PG County, which is where I'm from. But Morgan has actually struck out more hitters than I expected him to so far. He has a 23.6% strikeout percentage. He is relatively inexpensive. We've at least seen him show that upside at a pretty cheap salary against a very popular team to where you could make a case for him. But again, with the slate being as big as it is, I think I'm just not going to have trouble finding low-owned plays that I like better than Eli Morgan. On top of that, he overall has not been a good pitcher whatsoever. He's allowed 2 home runs per 9 innings, 4.83 xFIP. And based on minor league numbers and just, the stuff that he throws, I kind of expect his strikeout stuff to drop off going forward too. So I'm not getting to either pitcher, but I think that there's a little bit more of a ceiling. Plus you get some negative correlation with the field if you roll the dice on Morgan. But again, nothing that I'm planning on really doing.
We just got the Blue Jays lineup. If you're interested, Springer is in it. Dickerson not in it.
Okay, so yeah, Springer, Semien, Guerrero, Bichette, Hernandez. You get Alejandro Kirk as a very good catcher option. Draw Dyson's at the bottom. Doesn't hit for power, but he'll steal 8 bases if he gets the chance.
All right, who the hell is hitting 7th for the Reds that I don't have in here? Jose Barrero. Why don't I?
One of their prospects.
Well, I do have him. Why the hell is he not showing up? He just showed up as the number 7 in my thing, which is not ideal. So, Jose Barrero, what's your deal? 23378 is your FanGraphs number. That's what I have. I don't understand.
Do you have I don't know. Do you have a tilde or something?
No, he's just not getting found when I search for him. But I have him in every place that I thought that I should have him because I just pasted everything in and I was like, why am I not getting the next guy in this list? Anyway, nobody cares about why my sheet won't work right now. We've already talked about pitching for Cleveland and Milwaukee. We can move to hitting, where the Milwaukee Brewers look like a pretty good stack here against Eli Morgan. We have Milwaukee second in the top stack tool, but a mile away from Toronto. I don't think it's as far as it should be. I still have them second, but I think it's a lot closer at the top, also including the Yankees, but we'll get to them in a little bit. Talk to me about the Milwaukee Bats.
I think they're just, particularly on DraftKings, just egregiously underpriced. They are projected for massive amounts of ownership, and it's one of those situations where I think they should be also. This whole team, I don't know who DraftKings thought they were facing, but it sure as hell was not Eli Morgan. I don't know if maybe Shane Bieber had a rehab start recently and they thought maybe he'd be back, but nobody on this team is more expensive than $4,000 on DraftKings. Escobar at $4K, Christian Yelich at $3,900. You have Avisail Garcia back in the lineup at $3,300 against a pitcher in Morgan who's allowed a 197 expected ISO to righties. 285 to lefties. I know Yelich hasn't been good this year, but that salary more than makes up for that. You have 2K flat Dan Vogelbach hitting 6, 2K flat Rowdy Tellez hitting 8th. Can only roster one of those two guys on DraftKings, but they both have a lot of power. Omar Narvaez, probably the best value catcher on the slate at 3,500. Wong at 3,400. This is a team that is just completely mispriced across the board. So the way I kind of talked about it earlier and the way that it looks like I was getting to it, at least when I did my crunch at 3 p.m., was yes, if you look at the top stack tool, they are projected to be drastically overowned as a stack, but that doesn't mean that you just need to get away from these guys. Just pay attention to who you're playing them with. They are pretty much at every position the top value options on DraftKings. So in lineups where you have other high-owned stacks or you have high-owned pitching, like if you have Ray plus Ian Anderson and the Blue Jays, maybe use value other than the Brewers to round out that team. But as a whole, if you're going to some lower-owned stacks, I have no issue using, even a 25% on Yelich or 24% on Garcia. Granted, and there's a pretty good chance I think that those numbers actually end up being at least a little bit lower just because it is a big slate and, in large field stuff in particular, people play a lot of bad lineups. But it's just not going to be that difficult to find low-owned guys on this slate. So I still like the Brewers here. They project pretty much across the board as top options. You just have to be very aware of who you're pairing them with.
Yeah, only Eduardo Escobar in the projected lineup at 4K or higher. That's staggering. It's like they were projected to play in the opposite of course or something along those lines. This is just, these prices are just not correct. And it's not a bad lineup either. There's not, outside of Yelich, it's not elite anywhere, but at the same time,
including Yelich, it's not elite anywhere.
Well, that's true too. But there's no holes either. This is just a fully functional average team across the board in a really nice spot. So overowned, yeah, a little bit because the price tags are driving it. They're an optimizer team for sure. Be aware of it for the rest of your lineup construction, however, and it's pretty easy. Cleveland bats, anything here for you?
I think that's a tougher sell. Just kind of a middle of the road team for me. I don't think Adrian Hauser is a great DFS pitcher. He did have a fantastic start his last time out, but only a 17.7% strikeout percentage this season. He does have the second best ground ball percentage on the slate though. And considering first is Framber Valdez, and he's just in an entirely different league of ground ball getting. Hauser, is that tells you how good Hauser's been at getting ground balls. He's only allowed 0.79 home runs per 9, 4.34 xFIP. Just again, a middle of the road stack for Cleveland. I think individually, never going to be upset about getting to Jose Ramirez, although he's really expensive. Bobby Bradley has some power. Franmil Reyes certainly has power, but there are so many options on this slate. I don't anticipate getting to a lot of Cleveland. Just kind of looking now to see in that crunch earlier what I did. Ended up with a few lineups that had Ramirez, and that looks like basically it for Cleveland for me.
I don't have anything else here. Do you?
Nope.
All right, coming up after this show, 5:45, MLB Live Before Lock with Emac and Terry. But that doesn't end it here. 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time, college football Live Before Lock. Ben Raza, Matt Kajeski, breaking down the collegiate pigskin. We've got free content. MLB player projections are free today. That should interest every single person watching this show. Plus, NFL Week 1 projections are free if you're playing NFL DFS this weekend, and I assume that pretty much anybody that's going to listen to this will be playing NFL DFS, our projections are free. You should dig into that because, well, they're good. Subway Series, Mets and Yanks, 3.6 run implied total for the Mets, 4 for the Yankees. Tyler McGill and Jordan Montgomery. Montgomery at 9,400, 8% owned. Tyler McGill at 8,100, 19% owned. I would like to have a little bit less of both guys. I don't really love the idea of getting to 19% McGill against the Yankees, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the pitching for this one.
Yeah, that's how I see it too. On the one hand, I understand why McGill is getting some ownership. He has a 26% strikeout percentage. He's available at a discount compared, not only to Robbie Ray, but even to the, Framber Valdez and Julio Urias tier. And the Yankees do have some strikeouts in the lineup. They're losing their designated hitters, so no Giancarlo Stanton. It's it's, a relatively weak version of the Yankees, although there is still plenty of potential for damage. They only have a 3.9 implied run total, which we know is low for the Yankees. And overall this year, McGill has been solid. So I think that he's a good option. I just think that the ownership is there. And so, again, like when I made lineups earlier, I got the sum. I got him at I think I had 8%. I had about 7% McGill, but I just ended up getting more of, Marquez, using some other pitchers in that mid-range that we'll talk about that I don't like as much as McGill, but I thought that given the ownership discrepancy, it allowed me to get to teams like the Brewers and get to teams like the Blue Jays. So that's one spot that I think you can at least look to pivot. Not saying, you have to be underweight on McGill, but when you're thinking in terms of your entire lineup, that is one spot where I think it's kind of a questionable enough spot for McGill that you could look to some lower owned pitchers that aren't as good in that price range and say, okay, I got the ownership discount here. I'll go to some bats that I really like that are a little bit more popular. So I think McGill's a good play. I think the ownership's about where it should be. Okay. If not a little bit too high.
Are you getting to Montgomery at all at 9,400, pulling 8% ownership?
That's an even more difficult one for me because you're not getting that same salary discount that you are on McGill. I think that Montgomery is a perfectly fine pitcher. He has a 23.5% strikeout percentage this year, xFIP right around 4. The matchup against the Mets is basically neutral, but he's in that same price range with Valdez, who has a better matchup, with Urias, who has better strikeout stuff. The Mets do have a 3.6 implied run total. It's not a bad spot for Montgomery, but I'd be more interested if the ownership were, a little bit lower. If the big thing for me, I think, is what happens with Urias's projected ownership versus Montgomery, because if Urias is in the same ballpark as Montgomery at $100 less, I would rather go to Urias. If we get an ownership update where suddenly, you still have Valdez 5 times as popular as Montgomery, and then Urias starts being 2 to 3 times as popular, then Montgomery is going to start to pull up for me a little bit more. But as is right now, if I'm going to that price range, I would just rather be going to Urias.
Yeah, Montgomery showed up in 3% of my sims. Urias showed up in 8. I'd rather just flip-flop those two guys. I completely agree with you. So I don't have anything else really to add there. And then I don't really have anything to add from a hitter's perspective. I don't want to take any Mets. I don't think that that's super necessary given their implied total. And while I rarely care if I end up with Yankees, I don't anticipate ending up with all that many Yankees. To me, this is not an offense game.
Yeah, same boat for me. There's a lot of good pitching on the slate. There's also a lot of pretty bad pitching. And this is one of those games where it's got good pitching, but it's priced and or owned appropriately. I don't see a really good reason to go to either team. Rizzo is pretty cheap. So is Joey Gallo. Gleyber Torres got a nice bump in the lineup, but there's just so many options on the slate. It's tough for me to prioritize anything here.
That works for me. That's easy enough to deal with. I don't think there's anything else we should probably touch on. So let's keep it moving. Tigers and Rays, 4.1 run implied total for the Tigers, 4.9 for the Rays. Tyler Alexander and Michael Wacha. This is a spot where neither pitcher is really pulling any ownership. Are you anticipating getting to either Alexander at 5,400 or Michael Wacha at 8,100?
Not anticipating getting to Alexander. Do have some interest in Wacha as long as the ownership is projected to basically be non-existent. We have him with about a 2% ownership projection right now. I don't think he's a very good pitcher, but I don't think he's terrible either. He comes in with I think he has about a 22% strikeout percentage this year. 22.3% strikeout percentage, 4.02 xFIP. He gives up some power, but this Tigers team doesn't have tons of power, and the ownership is just so low. He's one of those guys in the price range with McGill where, yes, I think McGill's better. I think McGill, if I had to bet even money, I would take McGill. But McGill's also right now projected for 7 to 8 times the ownership. I think he's one of the guys you can use here that has a very similar range of outcomes and isn't getting nearly the ownership. So, to me, I can play Toronto or Milwaukee and Wacha, or I can play McGill and some other team. I'm just going to end up with a lot of those Toronto and Milwaukee teams that use Wacha instead, because I don't think the range of outcomes is that different.
Are you going to be ending up with a lot of Tampa Bay Rays against Alexander? They are third in our top stack tool, mild negative leverage. They're pretty expensive through the core of the order. I have them third in my top stack tool, pretty similar from a leverage perspective. Manny Margot pulling 21% ownership in the leadoff spot. Nelson Cruz at 16%. Margot is 3K, so at least we know why that ownership is happening. Otherwise, this doesn't seem all that difficult to get to.
Yeah, I didn't get to a lot of them earlier, but that was we still thought Matt Boyd was pitching. So I think this spot did get better. Like Boyd has struggled some this year, but he's still, I think, a better pitcher than Tyler Alexander. Alexander comes in with a 19.8% strikeout percentage against righties, 215 expected ISO, 340 expected WOBA. Park upgrade for the Tampa Bay bats as well. You mentioned Margot, very inexpensive leading off, just completely mispriced. But then you get Wander Franco, who's always one of the best shortstop options. Cruz has tons of power. Diaz is pretty cheap. Brandon Lau actually in the lineup here against the lefty, kind of surprising, but he's hitting fifth and he's expensive. So I doubt that you're really getting any ownership there. Certainly not someone that you would be singling out as a one-off, but if you think that Tampa Bay gets to Alexander early, there's a pretty good chance that Lau is getting to face right-handed pitchers for a lot of the game. Luplo is cheap. Meadows, kind of the same thought process as Lau. It's just a really high upside lineup, top to bottom. So I didn't get to a lot earlier. I think I probably get to a bit more now that we got the pitching change.
Good to know. Is Matt Boyd still your boy?
I said on a show the other day that I think thinking that the Astros should be willing to include Yordan Alvarez for Matt Boyd a couple of years ago might be the stupidest take I've ever had.
Yeah, you should have just not told anyone that was ever a take. That probably would have been a little bit more helpful for you. Understood where you were coming from at the time. It was right in the middle of, one, I don't think that we knew that the Astros were raging cheaters yet. And two, he was pitching really well, and everything that the Astros touched turned to gold. So
he was pitching really well, and Yordan Alvarez had played in the major leagues for like a month or something, and was having the best month that anybody had ever seen. But as a general rule, I'm still cool with trading out of nowhere prospects that are tearing it up for what seem like established, very, very good pitchers. It would have worked out horribly there, but
would have changed everything in the world too. Laffy might not have named his daughter after him.
True.
Yeah.
Forgot about that.
Who could have seen that one coming? Tigers bats?
I don't think so. Would feel differently if Waka were getting more ownership, but only a 4 implied run total here. Not a ton of power in this lineup. Akil Baddoo always going to be fine at 3,700. Same goes for Scope. Same goes for Grossman, but nothing that stands out to me.
Then let's move on to the Atlanta Braves and the Miami Marlins. 4.7 run implied total for the Braves, 3.5 for the Marlins. Ian Anderson and Trevor Rogers. Rogers at 5% ownership, 8,400. That's fine. The bigger piece here that we need to talk about, $6,600 Ian Anderson at 49% ownership. I don't even want to know what would have happened if this game happened to be in Miami. This looks great. I don't have anything to add. I think Ian Anderson should be north of 40% owned today. Any differences for you?
I have a lot to add as far as I'm kind of concerned about Ian Anderson. Sure. He's made 2 starts since coming back from the injured list. He has a combined 0 strikeouts in those 2 starts. One was against the Giants. One was in Coors Field. So it's not shocking that his strikeout numbers were lower than normal. 0 still stands out a bit. Bigger concern for me is that in those 2 starts, his average fastball velocity was down. It was also lower in his most recent start than it was in his first start back. His plate discipline numbers across the board were below average. Swinging strikes, chase percentage, zone percentage, first pitch strike percentage, everything down for him. But all of that being said, it kind of goes back to what we were saying with Herman Marquez, where am I confident that there's nothing wrong? No, but if you're going to knock $2,000 off of his salary, I mean, this is a spot where if Ian Anderson had done in his first 2 starts back from the injured list what he typically does, he'd be like $8,600, $8,700 here against Miami. So if you're just going to knock that $2,000 off for me, then I'm not really going to worry about the fact that he seems rusty in his first 2 starts back. One positive we saw in those starts was that he only threw 62 pitches in his most recent, but that's because he pitched terribly and was taken out. He threw 86 pitches against the Giants in that first start back. So we don't have pitch count concerns here. If he's pitching well, I'm expecting you're getting, at least 85 to 90 pitches. So that is good. And the matchup is really good. The price is good. The only concern I would have is that, everything that I mentioned before, but ownership is, I think, about where it should be considering the salary and the matchup. I got right around that 42% mark in the crunch I did earlier. Pay attention to what lineups you're pairing it with. Use him with your lower owned stacks, go somewhere else, Marquez, or, just away entirely from that price range with your higher owned stacks. But yeah, I think he's the best point per dollar option here. He's projected phenomenally by pretty much any system you look at. So
not projected phenomenally by the least smart person in our YouTube chat, however. This one's an easy fade, so it's clearly a good play then if you can actually look at it. I don't want to go to Marlins bats.
No, me neither.
Yeah, it's not on this size of a slate. This would be great if it were smaller. If there's like a just 7 o'clock games, maybe you can do that a little bit more, but this ain't it. This team stinks.
If you were gonna I think if you were gonna just like blindly stack against a pitcher for ownership reasons, it would be the Marlins. But the other issue that you run into is that there's not a whole lot of pitching that I would want to pay up for. Like I obviously like Robbie Ray a lot, but outside of that, like Carlos Rodon has major question marks in a tough matchup. There's not like a second Robbie Ray at the top. So you're saving a bunch of salary with the Marlins, but then it's just kind of like, okay, cool. I'm not really getting that much of an advantage by taking this really bad team.
I mean, I have them projected even worse. I got them at 3.3 expected runs. So they're even getting a little bit of a bonus. I don't care to be there. 6,600, even if things don't go super well for Ian Anderson, it doesn't kill you either. Like he can have a pedestrian start at 6,600 and it's not like the biggest problem in the world. Pay attention to the ownership and the rest of the lineup. That's all that really matters. Let's talk Braves bats. Do you want to target anything against Trevor Rogers? I have the Braves 13th, 15th in leverage. To me, they're just a part of this slate.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a relatively difficult matchup for them, but they do have so much power and they're not projected for much ownership that I am interested, especially because you are getting Trevor Rogers outside of Atlanta as well. He threw 83 pitches in his first start back from a family emergency last time out. So he's fully stretched out. He hasn't had a good start in a while. He had 3 straight not great starts before the missing all of August. But overall this season, he has been good. For the season, he has a 28% strikeout percentage, 3.65 xFIP. So this is one of those spots where I don't love either side in the sense of, I'm confident the Braves are going to do well, or I'm confident Rodgers is going to do well. But I am interested in both sides in tournaments just because the Braves are projected for virtually no ownership and they have massive amounts of power. If you think that Trevor Rogers is going to continue to struggle, then you should want to be over the field on Atlanta. And similarly, if you think Trevor Rogers is going to, if you think his stats for the season are what we can expect from Trevor Rogers, then him getting virtually no ownership makes me want to use him in tournaments. So he's one of the guys, right there with Michael Wacha that is just getting a lot less ownership than McGill. I think that McGill is better in terms of medium projection and guys that I would feel confident in, or relatively confident in. But in terms of range of outcomes, I don't think it's drastically different. So Rogers is another guy I don't mind using as a pivot away from McGill.
Sounds good to me. I don't have anything else in this game. Do you?
Nope.
All right. We are off to Twins and Royals. 4.9 run implied total for the Twins, 4.6 for the Royals. Griffin Jax and Daniel Lynch. Both guys at 1% ownership, both guys sub 6K, both guys not going to be in my lineups. Will they be in yours?
Lynch at 5,300, I think is reasonable. I didn't get I got like 5% earlier, but that was also with Matt Boyd in, and I got like 10% Boyd. So it seems like I was kind of using that sub 6K price point a bit. The case to be made with Lynch is simply the price tag. He's not been very good. He was absolutely awful his first 3 appearances of the season. The Royals sent him back to the minors. He's come back and been better, but still just pretty much completely mediocre, coming off of a rough start against the White Sox. But he's also had a pretty tough strength of schedule since coming back. Not that Minnesota is a pushover matchup either. You have Buxton, Polanco, Donaldson, Sano, Rooker, all these guys have power from the right side. But I've said it before, I think when you have a fully stretched out pitcher who has some semblance of talent, 5,300 is almost always going to be underpriced when you're thinking about their ceiling. So at low ownership, I don't mind using some Daniel Lynch, especially if you are trying to get away from some Anderson or, just can't quite afford to get there.
Not feeling the same way about Griffin Jax, though?
No, he doesn't meet the semblance of talent requirement.
All righty. Well, then talk to me about bats. Do you have a preference? Both of these teams popping up a little bit for me. Would you rather go to the Royals or rather go to the Twins?
I got to more Kansas City earlier. I just think the matchup against Jax is a bit better. I like the pricing on Kansas City. Perez is really expensive, but he's also like the best hitting catcher. He's just been phenomenal this year. But then you get some value with Benintendi hitting cleanup at 3,200, Nicky Lopez at 3,300, Santana sub 3K. Adalberto Mondesi is another one that is just going to be really easy to fit into lineups because he has third base and shortstop eligibility. Not a ton of power for him, but he does steal bases, which is really nice. So I got some more Kansas City. I do like getting to the Twins as well, though. They do have that right-handed power. Overall, Lynch has struggled this year. Like I said, he's been a bit better lately, but a 223 expected ISO, 378 expected WOBA to righties with an 18.5% strikeout percentage. I like both offenses here, and I think that's reflected in the team totals as well.
Yeah, I have the Royals 4th overall. I have the Twins 6th. I have the Twins with a little bit more positive leverage. There's a lot of ownership coming into the Royals, but a lot of it is just price driven. Ultimately, I'd be happy to be on either side of this game, but I think that I would get to more Kansas City over the Twins. Certainly helps that Griffin Jacks goes from Minnesota instead of Daniel Lynch. Lynch, quite a bit better. Minnesota bats. Buxton at 16%, nobody else above 7. There's certainly some power in the core of this order. I would like to uncover at least a little bit of this righty power, that's for sure. That Donaldson, Sano, Rooker trio, I mean, if Lynch doesn't have it today, that's going to look pretty good.
Yeah, agreed. Kind of just looking back at what I'd gotten to earlier, I was around 10% on Polanco, Rooker, Donaldson, 15% on Buxton. So kind of seems like, just kind of coming in around the field on these guys. It's a high upside spot. They have plenty of power. Lynch, I think, is okay, but certainly not someone that I'm shying away from. So, yeah, I like the Twins. They're just kind of like a middle of the pack stack for me.
Okay, that works for me. I don't have anything else for Twins and Royals.
No, me either.
All right, we're just past the midway point of this bad boy, so I need to let you guys know about the promo code DAK, DAK. It's a $1 Awesemo NFL Express weekly pass. Cannot beat something for just $1. So the Express Pass is your best way to dip your toe in the water of everything that we have to offer at awesemo.com. And it's bigger than it normally is. So with this Awesemo Plus NFL Pass, you get access to player and ownership rankings, chat, so our Slack chat, and everything we have to offer for showdown and single game contests. So now you get, for showdown and single game, player projections, ownership projections, top stack tool. You get our season-long fantasy football coverage, projected ownership and optimal lineup probabilities for tiers contests on DK. That's a lot for just $1 for the NFL. This offer only lasts through Monday. If you've ever wanted to check us out, this one's only going to cost you $1. Now is the time to do it. Use the promo code DAK. You'll either see the link in chat from Nightbot or go directly to awesemo.com and use that promo code. That was easy. 6 more games to go. Another half hour before we turn this one over to the Live Before Lock crew. White Sox and Red Sox. 4.7 run implied total for the White Sox. 3.8 for the Red Sox. Carlos Rodon, Tanner Houck. Ownership coming into Tanner? Not so much. Ownership coming into Carlos, 25% at 10,300. I'm going to need you to talk me through this one.
I have no idea. He's expensive. He's facing the Red Sox. Okay, so I guess the good things about Rodon are he's got the highest strikeout percentage on the slate at 34.7%. He's been very, very good this year, 3.06 xFIP. He would be a risky but strong option here, like under normal circumstances. The concern, I think, is that the White Sox are running away with their division. So there's no real reason for them to push Rodon to, some crazy pitch count here. He threw 67 pitches in his first start back, 5 innings, 77 pitches in 5 innings in his second start. Now, 10 days later, he is pitching again. Wasn't on the injured list over those 10 days, but he did miss a start because of a sore shoulder. So I have a really hard time thinking Rodon's going going like far enough into this game to where he's a real competitor with Robbie Ray, unless Ray just gets shelled and it's one of those like, oh, well, Ray scored 10 points, so Rodon beat him. It's hard for me to think that they have the same ceiling, given that there's no real reason for the White Sox to let him have the same ceiling as Robbie Ray. And then on top of that, it's a difficult matchup. Somebody in chat said Bogarts is back. I don't think we have an official Red Sox lineup, but guessing that they saw he was activated off of the COVID list. So that clearly would make the lineup better as well. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Like if this was a situation where like Robbie Ray is getting 40% and Carlos Rodon's getting 4%, kind of like we had the other day with Freddie Peralta, then I'd be okay saying like, okay, like I don't think this is going to work, but why not, give it a shot? If you're going to get ownership going to Rodon, I don't really see any point at all.
No, neither do I. I don't get it. This Red Sox lineup is solid. I don't love the implied total. I think we might see it go up a little bit if Bogarts does indeed show up in this lineup, which he is currently in the projected lineups. It's not that I don't like Rodon, but like you're paying 10,300, so you need a very specific outcome. And Like I've got the aggregate weighted runs created plus for the Red Sox at like 110. Like this is a legitimate offense in a hitter's park too. I mean, if he's 25% owned, I'm just more interested in going to a Red Sox stack.
I mean, I don't even really want to do that. It's just like, I think that there's a pretty good chance our ownership projection comes down or that he just ends up being lower on than we're projecting. But still, it's just, I don't think that if I want a good pitcher with a lot of question marks, I can find a lot of those on this slate. I can go to Joe Musgrove against the Dodgers. I can go to Julio Urias against the Padres. I can go to Valdez, in a good spot, but with questionable strikeout stuff. There's a lot of guys that I can go to. So I don't feel like Rodon's the only guy that I can like roll the dice on that maybe does, maybe he's going to go deeper than I'm expecting. It's not a matchup I really like. He's at one of the most expensive price tags. For me, it's just, I would just rather be getting more Robbie Ray if I'm paying up.
Yeah, that's also fair. I got Rodon in 14% of lineups. I think that's a much more realistic number. If he's going to be north of 20, I will happily be a little bit lighter. Do you like going to White Sox bats against Tanner Houck?
Do I like it? No, but I was actually doing it earlier, and I guess it makes sense. So Houck's interesting because he's pitched really well this year. 29.8% strikeout percentage, 3.27 xFIP, 0.59 home runs per 9 in his starts this season, 5.8% walk percentage. The issue with him from a DFS standpoint has been that kind of regardless of how many pitches he throws, the Red Sox have been pulling him around 5 innings. I made fun of it this morning because I always think it's kind of funny when teams seemingly are using innings limits instead of pitch limits. But someone who follows the Red Sox really close to me DM'd me with actually, with a good point, that Cora had said he doesn't like using Houck a third time through the order for, those reasons. That's legitimate. That makes sense. Still kind of surprised the Red Sox are doing it since their bullpen struggled, but that at least makes sense. And it does reinforce the fact that what we're seeing from the Red Sox, kind of regardless of how he's pitching or how many pitches he's at, they've been taking him out right around 5 innings. So it makes it difficult to like him from a fantasy standpoint, even though he is likely to have success for whatever amount of time for the 5 innings he's in. But all of that being said, if you're going to get 4 innings from the Red Sox bullpen and you still have some chance of having success against Houck when you have a lineup as good as the White Sox lineup is, they have Eloy Jimenez back, so that strengthens the lineup as well. They have a 4.8 implied run total. They're projected for not a whole lot of ownership here. So they're another one of those teams where if I get to them somewhat, I'm fine with that. I think the upside's really high. I don't feel very different between them and Atlanta and Houston. A lot of these teams where they have really, really good hitters, the Dodgers, where they have really, really good hitters, but they're also in a subpar matchup.
Do we want to dig into anything for Red Sox bats just in terms of the ownership for Rodon, or is it not a spot that you're looking to get to just in general?
It's not really a spot I'm looking to get to in general. I got to like none of it earlier. Maybe I get a little bit more, in my actual crunch, but it's just one of those where to me, they get kind of chopped off just because there are so many good spots and other teams to get to. Like for example, earlier, I didn't get to a lot of Tampa Bay. I would much rather be getting to more Tampa Bay than I got to than getting to more Boston. Like there's already teams I'm not getting that I want before I even start saying, well, what if Carlos Rodon is still dealing with his bad shoulder and pitches poorly? Like, yeah, that could happen. There's, a case you can make for literally every team on the slate. The Red Sox is a bit less appealing to me than a lot of other teams.
You and me both. We'll keep it going. Astros and Angels, 4.5 run implied total for the Stros, 3.3 for the Angels. Framber Valdez, Shohei Ohtani. Ohtani at 8,600, pulling in a crisp, no ownership whatsoever. Framber Valdez, 28% projected ownership. That is exactly where I have him coming out of the sim. So I will happily get to Framber Valdez, particularly against this Angels team that stinks.
Yeah, I think it's a really good spot. It's one of the best combinations of talent and matchup on the slate. The Angels lineup is bad. They strike out a lot. Valdez is someone that typically isn't that easy to get to in DFS because he's a very good real life pitcher. He's got an insane 70% ground ball percentage, very, very good at limiting runs. Doesn't give up power, 0.65 home runs per 9, 3.51 xFIP. The problem is he only strikes out 22% of hitters, which, while that's okay, if he's being priced for his run prevention skills, it puts him in like Marcus Stroman territory where typically he's priced around pitchers that are better strikeout pitchers than him. But here, where you have, there are better strikeout pitchers than him in that price range, but they all have much more difficult matchups than he does. So I think he projects as the best option in the group. That being said, it's still a bit of a Tyler McGill situation where I think Valdez is the best of those low 9K options, but I think the range of outcomes is very similar in terms of, what it looks like when they do well and have a good game. Is similar. Valdez's good game is similar to Urias's good game, is similar to Musgrove's good game. So it's another one where, Valdez is the guy that I like the most of that group, but I have no issue if I need a pitcher in that price range and have, Milwaukee bats or Toronto bats or Kansas City bats saying, okay, whatever, I'll take Urias instead of Valdez.
Do you want Ohtani?
I didn't get to any. You can make the same case for him that I was just kind of alluding to with Musgrove and Urias. It's a brutal matchup. The Astros are tough to strike out. They are a very good offense, but Ohtani is one of the best strikeout pitchers on the slate. He has a 29.7% strikeout percentage. He's only 8,600 on DraftKings. I wouldn't fault anyone for getting there. I personally didn't, at least in my first run, but the ceiling is definitely there for Ohtani. It's just a matter of kind of like with the offense is having to draw the line somewhere.
So this is not baseball related, but I just saw the tweet. The NBA is exploring a Field of Dreams style game. I want to put this out there right now. I hate it. I hate the idea. The last thing that I want to do is see an outdoor NBA game.
Is that what they meant? I thought maybe they were going to recreate the Space Jam court or something. I don't know what. How do you what is a Field of Dreams style NBA game? The Field of Dreams style baseball game was a baseball game on the field from Field of Dreams.
I don't know, some sort of iconic, Rucker Park, or you'd go to some street ball court or something like that. They played college games.
That would be cool, but to me, that's more. I mean, one, I think that would be cool. But two, I feel like the better comparison is the Winter Classic compared to Field of Dreams. Field of Dreams is a very specific thing that only relates to baseball. Yeah,
I hate it more than anything. All-Star game, love the idea. Real game.
Yeah. Real game, I think is terrible because, what
if it's windy that day?
Right. Yeah, I was going to say, baseball, you can recreate it enough. They used the dimensions from the White Sox Stadium, I think it was, for the Field of Dreams game. So basically, that was a baseball game. The dimensions were fine. Weather is weather. You play baseball outside. Hockey, I guess you get it to some extent, but it's not going to be as much of an issue. Getting the baskets to be perfect, the condition, the court to be perfect, like you said, the weather, it just could really screw with a regular season basketball game.
Imagine Steph Curry out there shooting in the breeze, and all of a sudden he's over 14 because every once in a while it just blows his ball 6 inches to the left. It's not fun to watch.
6th grade recess, when it's windy and you're out there trying to play basketball.
Oh, you're all right, I gotta shoot this one out to the right a little bit, bring it back in. I don't want to play a fade when I'm shooting threes. Anyway, sorry, I just saw it. I had to talk about it. Let's talk Astros bats against Ohtani. Is that a thing for today? Because they're not pulling any ownership outside of Bregman.
They're one of those, I was kind of saying a minute ago with the White Sox. It's a high upside spot. This is one of those games we talk about a lot where from a medium projection standpoint, Houston's not going to look very good. Ohtani's not going to look very good because both sides they're both in such tough matchups. But when you think about what it looks like when the Astros have a good game or when Ohtani has a good game, it's very, very good and potential, slate winning stuff. So on smaller slates, I would be really confident that I was going to get to Houston and probably also Ohtani. On a slate of this size, I'm not as confident. So it kind of just ends up being one of those where it's if I get there, cool, I'm happy with it. I like it, but also only so much exposure to go around. So I feel really similarly to the Astros as I do Ohtani. If you're someone building lineups and you're I want to get to the Astros here, I think it's a good play. I think there's a lot of good plays today, and at 3 p.m. they weren't making the cut for me. Maybe they will by 7.
Are the Angels the worst stack ever today?
I think so.
If you can't have Ohtani, the only guy that's any good in the damn lineup, sort of, Jared Walsh would say something about it, but holy hell, this team stinks.
Yeah, and then the matchup is pretty brutal too. Valdez is so good at getting ground balls. I have nothing for the Angels here.
Nope, not at all. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so Cardinals and Reds. We get Eric Johnson's boy John Lester on the hill for the Cardinals, Tyler Mahle for the Reds. John Lester is 1% owned, which is where he should be, although this Reds lineup isn't very good. Tyler Mahle pulling 10% ownership. I'm a little lighter there at 9,900. We did just get a Cardinals lineup, though. Are you rostering either Lester or Mahle?
I didn't get much in the crunch earlier. I had 1% Lester, 5% Malley. For Lester, it's basically that he's cheap. There's, like I said, I was getting exposure kind of spread out to all the sub six or a lot of the sub 6K guys. Lester found his way into a lineup. May or may not happen at 7:00. The Reds lineup looks pretty weak, but the top part of it is still solid. Like Castellanos is in there. India and Stevenson are both pretty good. Suarez is cheap. Aquino is cheap. Lester has been really bad. So, it's not the scariest lineup, but you're still talking about a pitcher in Lester that has a 13.5% strikeout percentage, 176 expected ISO, 352 expected WOBA to right-handed hitters this year. And the only left-handed hitter in this lineup is Joey Votto, which is certainly not any sort of a plus. On the other side, Tyler Mahle's strikeout stuff is really good. Comes in at 28.2%, but he's also priced up. He's facing a Cardinals lineup that is difficult to strike out. It's not the most productive lineup, but they don't strike out a lot. And then one thing also to note with Mahle is that his splits this year, he's actually only struck out 24.3% of right-handed hitters compared to 32.6% of lefties. He's allowed a 181 expected ISO to righties, sub 100 expected ISO to lefties. So you've just seen flat-out reverse splits from him all season long. And going from memory, I think that's something that's been the case in the past as well. If you go back to the start of last season, higher strikeout percentage to lefties, less power to lefties. If you go back to 2019, it evens out where he's basically neutral. So, at best, it's neutral, but I think there's a decent chance that those numbers continue to hold true. So the upside is there, but he's also expensive. It's just another spot where I think since he is getting some ownership, I'm more inclined to just be playing more Robbie Ray right now.
Okay. Yeah, do you like going to these Cincy bats against Lester? I mean, he is terrible. There's a ton of power in that Castellanos, Votto, Suarez, Aquino group.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't get to much. It's another one. I wouldn't fault people. They just didn't show up as much as some of these other stacks for me. Castellanos, I think, is a very good play. I think Suarez and Aquino are good plays as well. I will say when I made those lineups earlier, we didn't have this Reds lineup. So we didn't have Aquino, hitting sixth. I think we had Suarez hitting fifth, but we didn't have 2K Barrero in there, who shows no signs of being a good hitter, but he's 2K. So it's another team where it's like, yeah, they're fine. They're not one of the ones I happen to have. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. If the Reds win the slate tonight, I'm not going to be like, oh wow, I can't believe this team lit up John Lester.
Sure. By the way, the issue for Barrero's name is that there are 2 spaces in between Jose and Barrero in the export from FanGraphs.
Yeah.
So when I had it in, correctly, it was just like, oh, this guy doesn't exist. So 2 extra spaces. Cardinals bats against Tyler Mahle, no ownership at all. And it doesn't really feel like a spot that I'm trying to get to.
Smaller slate, I'd be pretty interested. Bigger slate, I'm not.
That'll do it. So now is the time, with about 15 minutes left to go, we talk a little bit about the presenting sponsor of this show, and that would be Jock Market. They've turned fantasy sports into a stock exchange. So you're buying and selling shares of players in real time, whether it's NBA, MLB, NHL, PGA. You can make real money during the game. You can buy shares of a hitter that hits leadoff. He could hit a leadoff home run, and you can sell those shares immediately and lock in some profit if you would like. Or you could short players. You could do the exact opposite. Download the app in the App Store to get started. Use the promo code Awesemo when signing up to get up to a $50 bonus on that first deposit. This offer is good for the Awesemo community. Don't pass it up. Go check out Jock Market and use that promo code Awesemo. We have 3 games to go. Next one up on the list, Athletics and Rangers. 4.6 run implied total for the A's, 3.5 for the Rangers. Paul Blackburn and our boy from last week, Glenn Otto. These guys have the exact same projected FIP in Steamer. That should be interesting. I don't think that Paul Blackburn has ever been a full run favorite in a game before. He is 6K, pulling 11% ownership. Otto, 6,300 today, pulling no ownership. What do you want to do with pitching in this matchup?
What I want to do and what happened when I crunched earlier are 2 very different things. I want to completely ignore the pitching. I got like 10 to 14%, somewhere in there. It was like 14% Paul Blackburn at 6K.
Okay.
He's not a good strikeout pitcher. He does a good job of getting ground balls. He is pitching in Oakland, which is a difficult park to hit in. The Rangers do have a 3.5 implied run total. They are the Rangers. They're really bad. Blackmon, yeah, like Blackburn isn't a good pitcher by any stretch. It's more just about what I'm able to do with the rest of my lineups, and he's relatively low owned. So again, no real strong take there. If I crunch lineups later and I don't have Blackburn, I'm cool with that. But just seemed like a pretty useful piece when I built lineups earlier, and I'll hope for the best. As far as Glenn Otto goes, not getting there. Just a brutal matchup for him against Oakland. Yeah, the park is good, but he's put up good numbers in the minors, but he's still in his career thrown a total of about 40 innings above Double-A. This just isn't someone that, even if he's going to be good at some point, may or may not be, very unlikely that he's actually ready at this point. And then now you're facing an Oakland team that's really tough to strike out, that has a ton of power, a ton of good hitters. So as weird as it is, Paul Blackburn's the guy for me from this game.
Fantastic. Is there hitting for you here? I have the A's 12th. It just doesn't feel like a spot where I'm trying to target offense.
Yeah.
As a stack, at least.
Yeah, the park hurts, I think. It's just another team where there's a lot of slates, I think, where I would really like Oakland here because there is the uncertainty of what Otto is and the relatively high likelihood that he's not a major league pitcher at this point. Yeah. And you do get some actually favorable pricing on Oakland. If Josh Harrison's leading off at 3,900, that would be a good value. Lowry at 3,600 looks good. Olsen is obviously great, but there's just so many other things that you have to compare them to on this slate. And hitting in Oakland, especially in September, is definitely something that makes me less interested than I otherwise would be.
I don't really even want to advocate for Rangers bats. No. Blackburn not pulling nearly enough ownership. So I'm going to go ahead and skip it. What I am going to say is 500 concurrent viewers and 84 likes. Y'all are slacking. Hit that thumbs up. It helps us out a ton. There's no reason we shouldn't be over 100. And honestly, 150 should happen. We want to try to get as many as we can so that the live before lock crew can't take any credit for any of the likes that show up on this video. Mariners and Diamondbacks, probably Marco Gonzalez going for the Mariners, Madison Bumgarner going for the Diamondbacks. It's a 4.6 run implied total for Seattle, 3.9 for Arizona. We do not have Marco Gonzalez in ownership. He showed up in 10% of lineups in my sim. Meanwhile, Bumgarner at 8,500 showed up in 3%. Are you going to get to Gonzalez? Are you going to get to Bumgarner? Are you going to get to both?
I mean, I'll probably get to both in 150 lineups. I wouldn't get to either in 3 max. Bumgarner is he's another one where I think you can move some of that McGill ownership to him. I don't think he's very good. I don't love the matchup here against Seattle, but the range of outcomes really isn't that different, I don't think. Right now we have Bumgarner with an 8.2% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. We have McGill at 11%. We have McGill getting 7 times the ownership. It's just another spot where, yes, I would rather get McGill, but if I'm getting the Blue Jays, I'm getting the Brewers, I'm getting Kansas City, these offenses that I really like, I need to have lower ownership somewhere. And I think that going to basically the field against McGill, just as an example, where priced around Bumgarner makes some sense to me.
Yeah. Gonzalez will be interesting if and when he ever gets named as a starter. Sean Nolan suspended for 5 games. I don't know what he did.
I'm guessing foreign substance, but I have no idea. I know he was ejected from like yesterday's game or the day before, whenever he pitched. I didn't see what it was for.
Okay. Well, then let's talk bats in this game. And I don't know about you, but I think I'm already done.
Yeah, pretty much. Arizona was earlier. Yeah, Arizona. We have Arizona as the 4th highest top stack percentage. Granted, there's a lot of teams lumped in there, but actually now we have them 2nd. I don't know if we are expecting Gonzalez to pitch or what, but they have a 4 implied run total. They aren't.
Yeah. Do we just immediately assume that it's like a replacement level pitcher in order for this to happen? Because they are 100% not going to be 2nd whenever this ends up happening.
And to be clear, I don't think Marco Gonzalez is that good either. Like, he's allowed a 202 expected ISO to righties this year, 17.5% strikeout percentage. I'm not saying like, oh, wow, I can't believe we have them projected to do well against Gonzalez. It's more so they're still Arizona. They're still facing a, average to slightly below average major league pitcher. There's a hell of a lot of teams on this slate, either A, in better spots, or B, just better than Arizona. So yeah, I think that comes down at some point between now and lock. Either way, I won't be getting there.
Yeah, I have them 16th. I think that's a little bit more reasonable than 2. And there's no question that it's happening because of a pitcher issue with Marco Gonzalez not being named the starter.
Yeah. Nick Ahmed, 2,800, assuming he leads off, is a perfectly reasonable value. There is value in this team. Like I was getting to them.
They're cheap. They're super cheap.
Yeah. I got to them a little bit. Ahmed's fine. Marte and Kelly are actually pretty decent. Walker's cheap. Young is 2K flat, hitting sixth. You can use these guys, especially, for example, if you are going, like if you're stacking, when we talked about the Brewers earlier, I said you probably didn't want to use like the Brewers as value if you already have Ray and the Blue Jays. Use the Diamondbacks as value. That's one of the ways you can kind of get around, doing that. So they do have a purpose on the slate. They're just not, a team that I expect to be getting outside of where it's just like, all right, I need some cheap bats and I need them to be not very popular.
Yeah. Look, as a value play, it's different. As a top stack play, you're not going to find that given the current implied totals and stuff along those lines. I don't have anything else for Mariners and Diamondbacks.
Same.
We're going to have some time here. We got one more game to go. We're going to have some time to take some questions, sum up all of our thoughts before we bounce on out of here for the Live Before Lock crew. So let's finish it off with the Dodgers hosting the San Diego Padres. 4.1 run implied total for LA, 3.4 for San Diego. Julio Urias and Joe Musgrove. Urias at 4% ownership. I got him to 7. Musgrove at 1% ownership. I got him to 6. I think both of these guys seem okay, but they're not major priorities to me. Where are you landing on the pitching?
Yeah, that's where I'm at as well. Urias, I think, is a good option. It's a tough matchup, but the Padres do only have a 3.4 implied run total. Urias comes in with a 27-ish, 26.7, something like that, percent strikeout percentage. This season at 26.7%, only a 5% walk percentage, 3.61 xFIP. He's a good pitcher. Sean V said earlier he doesn't go deeper than 5 innings. Yes, he does. He's averaging almost 6 innings per start this season. He's got a couple of 7-inning starts in his last 10. So ignore that. But it's just, I haven't, at least in the crunch I did earlier, I didn't get to that 9K price range a whole lot. So like I was under the projected ownership on Valdez, and I was over on Urias, but it wasn't by a lot. It was just that, Urias is 3%. I got like 5 or 6. Valdez, I got like 12. But at least in the crunch earlier, I was just using a lot of cheap pitching as opposed to paying up. That's something that certainly could change. And if it does change, I like Urias and I like Musgrove in the same way that I like Trevor Rogers and Waka at that 8K price tag. At 9K, you just have one guy soaking up a lot of the ownership. I think Valdez is the best play there. If you're ignoring ownership, if ownership for the lineup you're building doesn't matter, Valdez is the guy. But you get a higher strikeout rate from Urias. You get a higher strikeout rate from Musgrove. If you play their matchups out 100 times, they're going to get lit up sometimes because the Dodgers and the Padres are good. But there's also going to be a higher percentage of times where they just have good games than the current ownership reflects. So that's why, compared to Valdez's ownership, you can use these guys in tournaments if you need to save ownership at pitcher and you have the money to be in that price range. Neither one's a priority, but they do fit specific lineup builds.
Are you using any hitters? I have the Padres 9th. They're not pulling any ownership. I've got the Dodgers 20th, which is honestly kind of surprising to me given the fact that they're the Dodgers, but pretty expensive across the board. What do you want to do with bats?
This is another one where like I like the idea of the bats. I just didn't get to them because there's so many other teams that I like. Like the Dodgers, whenever they're going to be low owned, I think they're a good stack. We know Musgrove is capable of blowing up, but more often than not, he's going to be good. Urias is good, but the Padres have good hitters. It's just there's so many teams that aren't getting crazy amounts of ownership and also enough low owned pitching. I think that's the thing that's driving it too for me. Like if there wasn't so much pitching that had a reasonable path to success here, I would have a harder time getting to like the Blue Jays and the Brewers and the Royals and these teams that really project well, because it would be like, well, there's not low owned pitching that I like at all. But there is today. So I've been able to get to those teams, and it naturally, forces out some of these other teams in lower probability spots like the Dodgers. If, I were not, if you're, watching the show and you're like, no, I'm going to Valdez, I'm not using Urias, or I'm going to McGill, I'm not using Waka, then by all means use teams like the Astros, the Dodgers, the Padres, because you're going to need to save that ownership somewhere, and they are very high upside stats.
Boys chirping about that, those innings in chat.
Oh yeah. The Dodgers have held him to 4 innings in 4 of his last 6. He hasn't thrown less than 5 innings in 5 6, 7, 8. He hasn't gone less than 5 innings in any of his last 10 starts.
How could one person be so wrong so frequently? It's incredible. Oh, Tyler, perfect. Perfect. I love it. I love it so much. And he's doubling down on it. Oh, one of you two are looking at the wrong thing. That's for sure.
No, he corrected it to 5 innings. He has thrown 5 innings in 3 of his last 5 starts. He threw 96 pitches in his last start, was taken out after 5 2/3 innings. He was pitching in the 6th inning, put a couple guys on base. They took him out at 96 pitches. That's not limiting anything. That's taking him out when he got in trouble at 96 pitches. The start before that, he went 6 innings through 86 pitches. The start before that, 74 pitches, 5 innings. No idea what happened in that game. He hadn't pitched in 2 weeks in that game. So, yeah, 96 pitches, almost 6 innings his last time out. There's no reason to think that they're pulling Urias at 5 innings if he's at like 80 pitches or something.
You're going to have to change your YouTube name to Sean L after that one because that is embarrassing. All right, let's sum it all up. We done on this slate. Favorite stacks?
Toronto, Milwaukee, Kansas City, but they're also going to be popular. So you need to be paying attention to what you're doing with the rest of your lineups. As far as lower owned teams, Tampa Bay actually getting some ownership now, so that changed. But I was going to say I like Tampa Bay a lot. Lower owned teams, though, if you are going with more popular pitching, Atlanta, I think, certainly has the upside to be a strong stack here at their ownership. The Dodgers at 1% ownership, certainly a team that you can use to offset some of the chalk pitching. So I think Minnesota as well, a little bit lower owned. So really, depends what pitching you're going with. But ideally, I'm using some low owned pitching, and I'm getting Toronto and using the Brewers and KC for some value.
Favorite pitchers?
Robbie Ray, Ian Anderson, Ramon Marquez, both of those DraftKings specific where you need 2 pitchers and they're really, really cheap. If you're looking FanDuel where that doesn't matter as much, Robbie Ray, at 11.2. I think Valdez is still fine, even though he's expensive at 10.5. Looking down the list a little bit, Anderson still is okay at 7,800. He still projects really well. I would point out Urias at 9,600 with 1% ownership, even though those innings concerns certainly are more important to me on FanDuel than on DraftKings.
Final question, one I don't ever ask you, but I'm going to do it anyway because I think the people love it.
If you ask me who hits a home run, I'm just going to sign off.
Dong pick for today. Who you got? Who's going yard today? Give the people what they want.
Can I just take Vlad?
Sure, if you want to. You can be the Chris Randone of the show today.
Oh, I always aspire to that.
Yeah.
For somebody not on the board, or obviously he's on the board in this conversation, but someone that isn't going to stand out in DFS, Matt Olson.
Okay, I like the call. Matt Olson showing up 16th in my home run model. I'm going to take somebody that's not getting any ownership. Gonna go to my Rockies. Give me CJ Cron. He is coming in a crisp. Shout out to Ben Raza. Go watch the College Football Live before lock after this. Coming in a crisp 5th, 2% owned. So that's going to be my spot. Don't go anywhere. MLB Live before lock is coming up right now on this stream. You don't have to do anything. Just sit there. Sean V, if you want to leave, you can do that. But everybody else, stay right here on this stream. Good luck tonight in MLB, everybody. We'll talk to you again later.
singing Bad Religion song while I'm rocking out over here while I'm updating on my stuff.
And we are live. It's the Awesemo MLB Live Before Lock show. I'm not your old pal Emac. I am Josh Engelman. Can't you tell? Wardrobe, I'm a Chinese spy. The voice inflection, I've got it all. I'm joined today by my dad, Josh's dad. How's it going?
All right, now we're aging me up a little bit more than I'm comfortable with if we're doing that. I mean, Josh is like within a couple years of me, but at least he's younger. If I'm your dad now, I don't know. This new-looking Josh I got to deal with here. All right. What's up, son? How you doing? How was your big trip?
It was good. It was fun. For those of you that wondered where I was for the last 3 weeks, or for those of you celebrating, I had a nice little trip up to Alaska for about 10 or 11 days. Got to do a half marathon up there in Anchorage. We did a little trip out to Sitka. I got to go see a glacier, all sorts of animals, a lot of fun. Then I went down and saw family along the West Coast. So I am back. Last night was the first night that I played mass multi-entry, or maybe it was the night before. I've lost track. I didn't for 3 weeks. I one little traveling laptop. That was it, Terry.
Wow. So you're doing. I know you're a no slates off guy under most circumstances. Were we just like limited volume, maybe a couple slates off while on vacation, but still getting?
We were hand building a couple lineups on the phone because the Alaska's 4 hours behind, not even 3 hours or 4 hours. Behind.
I didn't even know which direction.
Yeah, so I'm all lost. I'm staying up late and getting up early, so it's crazy now. But yeah, doing a lot of hand building just to keep my streaks intact.
Right on.
The last of the crowns, they changed their rewards program, and it's just
Yeah, you were saying. We got to get you doing one of those for the site, just reviewing some of the rewards and helping people cash in on all those things and helping people manage bankrolls. I think you're perfect for that. And it's something that people seem to like out there, and it's definitely not something that's in my bag of tricks. So I'm going to kick that one over to you. One of these days, we're going to get you writing that.
Yeah, the one of the key things that you guys want to do is you want to look at new sports betting that's available. Arizona just went online yesterday, right. So we're up to like 9 states now, but they are just giving money away. So if you're anywhere where you can do that, or when you're traveling, you can be off and running and doing that as well. And they have all sorts of signups that you can utilize. If you go through any of our links on Odd Shopper, generally that will just automatically hook you up with the best one. Things are going nuts right now for NFL Week 1. They're doing a lot of essentially guaranteed bets or wagers to push down the over-under to basically zero, stuff like that. Depending on the site you're on, you're getting risk-free bets. Yes, they want you to put in $1,000, but they give you your first bet risk-free for $1,000. If you would have bet on Tampa Bay last night, could have been an exciting one to watch.
Do you think we got the best game of the NFL season in the first game of the NFL season, and it's all downhill from here? Or is that just me?
We may have, and
it's such a good game.
Somehow we're rooting with, or now I'm rooting with Tom Brady. I don't know how that works. Perhaps it was Bill Belichick that just made everybody insufferable with the Patriots. I mean,
at this point, at 44, dude's older than I am. He's still playing in the NFL. I got to give him a little bit of begrudging respect at least. So it's difficult to root against him at this point for me. I don't necessarily pull for him. I don't love him, but I've got a healthy respect for him now. Plus, my team's the one that beat him twice. So, we've got that going for us.
All right. People are asking. I'm just looking at chat here. I'm going to stop. I have had the video on, but I'm going to turn that off. I'm wondering if people are saying I'm buffering. It could be because I haven't had this laptop turned on in 3 weeks. So it's probably going around and updating a variety of things. Yeah, I tried to turn it on an hour ago, so all that would happen before we got on air. But we're going to jump on here. We're going to talk about Jock Market. They're the sponsor of our show. We're getting out of here at 6:25 tonight because we have the college football live before lock. There are 4 games tonight starting at 7:30 on the East Coast. We, of course, have our 13 games for MLB. Those were just broken down in great depth by Josh Engelman and Adam Scherer. So we're going to jump in. We're going to hit some high notes here. Reminder for all you guys, we do have our podcast network where we're putting out all of this column. All of this content, anything that has a shelf life's going out there. We have, I think, 7 now different podcast channels. You get the main channel, but then you get everything sports specific. We also have Betting You that comes out every Wednesday. They're also sponsoring this show, or they're bringing you part of this show. That is Matt Gajeski. That is Ben Raza. They're going to be the guys on next as well with the DFS slant, as well as with some prop bets for tonight's 4-game slate for college football. And then they're kicking us off. See what I did there, Terry? Tomorrow, we've got just a massive college slate. We're putting forth over 8 hours of live YouTube content, both Saturday and Sunday, plus another hour to 2 hours each day of just video on demand. This is crazy. Subscribe to Awesemo YouTube channel. Subscribe to Awesemo Fantasy, which is the Awesemo Fantasy Football channel, and the Awesemo Odds channel. You've got to be plugged in here. We got you covered with literally everything. And then Tyler's Fans Only account. For those of you that like to see what producers do in front of the camera, well, you can go find that as well. Terry, let's hit on some pitchers here at the top end. We've got Robbie Ray more or less in a class by himself. Did set the MLB record for most strikeouts through his first 1,000 innings. Going off memory, I think it was 1241, taking over from Yu Darvish, who had 1222. He did that against these very same Baltimore Orioles. That was his third straight game that he had double-digit strikeouts in. He was okay in his last start. He's been phenomenal this year, top 6 in ERA, WHIP, and strikeouts per 9. The pucker factor is always high with Robbie Ray, but he's going against Baltimore. I believe this will be the third or fourth time he's squaring off against them. Is he your top option today along with the masses?
Yeah, I mean, speaking of begrudging respect at this point, I've mentioned it every one of his last few starts. I am uncomfortable still getting to Robbie Ray just because I've witnessed so much Robbie Ray. I've owned Robbie Ray because I've chased all those strikeouts that he's racked up over the years, but he's really put it together this season. I mean, it's inarguable at this point. Even I can't go against it. He's pitching deep into games. I mean, I'm looking at his game log, and the entire top end of the game log we're talking about is all 6s, 7s, and 8s. He gets deep into games. He racks out double-digit strikeouts. There's 6 examples in there of double-digit strikeouts, a handful of 8 strikeout games. He's just been dominant this season, and he's getting it done largely by cutting his walk rate in half. He is at a 6.4% walk rate for the season. Over the last 4 years, he was averaging like a 13 and change percent walk rate. So, I mean, it is massively down this season. 3.21 xFIP induces a 15.5% swinging strike rate, has a 32.3% strikeout rate for the year. There's nothing not to like about his ability to get hitters to swing and miss. What you get concerned about is if he does issue a few too many free passes, you're going to have guys on base. In the rare event that guys make contact with these pitches, they do still barrel the baseball pretty frequently. 8.7% barrel rate is a little high. 42.1% hard hit rate is definitely high. 90.2 mile an hour average exit velo. 16.8 degree average launch angle. So guys are hitting the ball with elevation on a home run trajectory, hitting it pretty hard. It's just that he's really, really limited the degree to which they're able to make contact, and he's striking out more guys and sitting and walking less. So he's been safe. He's keeping himself afloat with those walks, those limited walks. I think the salary's inflated. It's more than I want to pay for Robbie Ray, but I think he makes the most sense. He's the standout option on the entire slate for me. It makes a ton of sense to get to him around the field on probably over the field, honestly, on FanDuel, where he's 11,200, significantly more than most of the good options on the slate. 10-7 on DK, he's a little bit more playable, but there's way more of the field there. So it's a little bit more of an undercut for me, I think, on DK, just because there are a bunch of options that all project fairly similarly and look fairly good on this board, where I can spread out some of those shares. I don't need to be overweight on the DK slate, I don't think.
All right, let's move down the list here. We have one Tyler Mahle taking the bump tonight. He is in St. Louis taking on the Redbirds. Terry, I snookered somebody in a long-time dynasty league that I just crashed in. I played them all for fools this year, slow rolled them, and made a monster deadline deal here, loading up my team for next year. What do you think about Tyler Mahle tonight?
It was some sucker must have gotten saddled with this guy. I assume he was part of the trade since you mentioned it. I talked about trying to pry him away from you all season long on these various shows. So I'm glad to report that on deadline day, I was finally able to get it done. Our waiver wire extended trade deadline, like baseball used to do, of course, because we got to have 2 trade deadlines. But I was able to pry away Tyler Mahle and Chris Bryant for a package of very, very good prospects that EMAC will enjoy for years. I love Tyler Mahle. I really like him in this spot going up against the Cardinals. Cards decent at avoiding strikeouts. That's the one thing that they do pretty well against right-handed pitching. They have bear with me a half a second here. They have a 22.1% strikeout rate against righties this season. That's in the upper third of the league. The create runs 9% worse than average. 3.29% home run rate is below average. 151 team ISO is below average. There are individuals that are spectacular hitters and excellent power hitters within this lineup, but a lot of them are underachieving this season. Nolan Arenado, 29 home runs is very good. A 237 ISO is very good, but a 111 WRC plus for a player like Arenado, you expect a little bit more run creation out of him. You expect a little more than a 254, 308 front end of his triple slash with a 490 slugging percentage. Those aren't Arenado-esque numbers. So with him, Goldschmidt, similar kind of underperformance, a little bit better in the runs creation department. Tyler O'Neill, massive power in there, having a great season. Outside of them, it's kind of a clunky lineup anyway. There's a few power bats in there, but there's some strikeouts in those power bats on the back end, like Paul DeJong. So I like throwing Tyler Mahle up here, and I love the fact that he's getting no ownership. Same price, $9,900 across both sites, around 10% on DK, around 5% on FanDuel. I'm happy to get well over the field on both of those numbers. I think it's an upside spot for Mahle, 28.2% strikeout rate on the season, so he can find additional strikeouts in this Cardinals lineup. He's walked too many, 8.4% walk rate, gives up a little bit of barrel, 7.3% barrel rate, but it turns into only a 33.5% hard hit rate. So he's able to limit quality contact a little bit, keeps him safe enough on the walks. I'm not that worried about it. And the swing and miss stuff is good enough. I think there's upside here without the field on him. If he was more popular, he'd be less appealing.
All right. Somehow I turned my camera off here. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I just clicked back over there and I noticed that we had lost you on the video, but all right. I'm glad to still have your voice
just make sure that gets back here. There we go.
There he is.
Let's see. I think it's not. Now it's not. It's on my regular camera. I'm sorry. It's not on my HD camera. The whole impersonating Josh thing here screwed me up. Somehow I brought the mojo of the camera just turning itself off by channeling Josh there. If you guys have watched other shows, you know that's an issue he's had. So we'll get that squared away here on this one. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's just not. Anyway, I'll play around with that for just a second here. But now I'm completely gone here. All right, we're just not going to touch anything. We're just going to hope everybody can hear me. And then we're just going from there. So the Tyler Mahle thing, so you and I did a show before I went on hiatus here, and I was saying less than flattering things about him. I had thought he had kind of disappointed. I had gone back after that show and looked through it and realized I was sorely mistaken. And I don't know what I got in my head, or if I was just combining one or two bad starts by him with Luis Castillo or something like that. But he's been really, really good. The guy I'm interested in is Framber Valdez. Now he's going to be going against the Angels tonight. He has to take on Shohei Ohtani. I wanted to go look it up and see how many home runs has Ohtani actually hit while he's been a starter. Now, we know he did that in the opening game this season. I want to say it's 2 or maybe 3 of his starts. Now, he has 43 home runs on the season. He does have a couple multi-home run games, but not many of them seem to come into starts. I don't know if I don't want to say, he's completely preoccupied with worried about pitching, or if it's just changing things, or maybe he's not, completely swinging from his heels, or he's being a little more ginger. But I'm hoping, hey, perhaps Ohtani won't hit one for his own cause, which just amazing that he's leading the league in home runs. So it's just absolutely wild. Yeah. But Framber Valdez doesn't always get the strikeouts that we want. They sort of come and go, but he has been phenomenal at limiting power. I want to say in my note sheet, I closed that out now when I was trying to get my camera back. I believe that he has allowed either 6 or 8 home runs on the year in just over 100 innings. I know in his last 50 innings across 8 starts, I believe he has only allowed 1 or 2 home runs. So he's really cut down on the power. Strikeouts not quite been there, but everything else has been there. Going against the Angels, you really only have to worry about Ohtani, and that's really it. Nobody else is terrifying on this one. Last I looked, they were 2.5-1 favorites to win this one. That cushions a little bit. If he can get the win there, that cushions a couple strikeouts on DK in particular, not going his way. How are you feeling there about Mr. Framber Valdez?
Yeah, I like Framber. He's a pitcher we've talked up a few times through this season, and I love getting to guys, not even necessarily for DFS purposes. I just find him a fascinating pitcher, a guy with a -6 degree average launch angle allowed for the season. That's spectacular. That's just a talented guy doing what he does really, really well. He's got a 69.9% ground ball rate for the season. If he doesn't finish over 70, I'll be disappointed. That's a number I've been tracking every time he started through the season. I like him to get over 70, but it's a spectacular ability to keep the ball ball on the ground and just totally take the bats out of the hands of the opposing team in terms of power upside, in terms of home runs. So yeah, you get Ohtani in there. He's obviously scary against anybody. He can elevate the ball against anybody, but this is a guy who it's going to at least be a real challenge for him to do it. And to your point, there's not many other major league bats in this lineup right now. Joe Adell is a kid I still expect a lot from as a prospect coming up. He's got a ton of power in that bat. It hasn't really come through at the major league level. He still strikes out too much, hasn't gotten a good enough amount of the bat on the ball. Similar story with Brandon Marshall, though he's making 52.2% hard contact in his 172 plate appearances with a 10% barrel rate. That's a pretty solid little contact profile, but it's not translating into much. 253, 314, 367 with a 114 ISO, creating runs 11% worse than average. Those are two of the better up-and-coming hitters in this lineup. The only other guy I'd really be concerned about is Jared Walsh. So while you're not getting the major strikeout upside from Framber here that you are from some of the other hitters, or other pitchers rather, he might find a few additional strikeouts in this lineup in particular. It's a fairly heavy strikeout rate on the average for this team. So I like the spot for Framber here. I think he's worth the money, and he's another pitcher that's not really getting owned to a big degree. 25%-ish at 9,100 on DK. You can float through that. That's fine. And then under 10% at 10.5 on FanDuel. I actually like that spot. So that's a pitcher I expect I would get to.
All right, updating the odds. Just get that page open. Hey, you guys can find all over this at AwesemoOddsShopper.com. We do have the Houston Astros at just shy of 2-1 favorites. I was going off an overnight line in my notes. They're writing up the Spotlight Hitters and Stacks article that's free in front of the paywall every single day. Terry also writes a tournament leverage article. We go relatively in depth on some of these. How do we not write up the same teams? Well, my angle is I give you 3 pitchers as well as 2 or 3 different stacks, but mine are limited to 1 for each slate. So I give 1 on the 7 o'clock slate, 1 on whatever the mid slate is. If there's an early slate, you get that. If there's a late slate, you get that. We talk a lot about the Mariners and the Arizona Diamondbacks because there is money to be made on these short later slates where there is not a lot of content on that. And then Terry usually tries to limit himself to 4,500 words or less when he is working out his articles there. Continuing down the list here as we are looking for some more pitchers, heading to the late game, kind of the last guy that I would put in the ace category, that would be Julio Urias, who is going against San Diego. We do not have those lineups yet, but Dodgers are minus 150 favorites. It is going to be 80 degrees in Los Angeles. That is one of the warmer environments today. No weather issues across the rest of the board to worry about. However, everything is generally a little bit cooler. We're halfway into September here, or almost halfway into September. So we're seeing everything come down 15, 20 degrees from what it was just 3 or 4 weeks ago. So keep that in mind as things start to lean a little bit closer to being pitcher friendly weather environments. How do you feel about Urias going against the Pod Squad?
Yeah, I agree with the idea of him as one of the last top-end options, if not the last extreme top-end option. It's a better matchup than it seems like. You know, people hear the Padres and they think, oh, fantastic team, because they were forecast to be one of the best teams in baseball, and they've been very good throughout the season. But if you look at their numbers in the aggregate, the active roster against left-handed pitching, they're good at limiting strikeouts, 22% strikeout rate, but they create runs 2% worse than average, and they're worse than that in terms of power. 2.83% home run rate is one of the bottom marks in the split in the entire league, and a 149 team ISO. So they actually lack a little bit of power. They trail the curve in creating runs against lefties. And I think a pitcher with Urias's talent, again, it's another guy where I expect 26.7% strikeout rate on the year, 11.8% induced swinging strikes. I expect he's going to be able to go into this lineup and find a few additional strikeouts as he makes his way through. And he's not drawing any ownership. The ownership is the most exciting part about this play to me. Under 1% on FanDuel, under 3% on DK for 9,300 and 9,600, or reverse those FanDuel to DK. That is a spectacular spot based on the ownership for tournament play. This is a smash spot. The Padres are underperforming expectations against left-handed pitching, and nobody's going to be on him. He's affordable. I don't really get where the field is if our projections come through. So that is a great spot in terms of just the leverage available. It's one of the better spots on the board.
All right, before we head into some of these mid-tier and bargain pitchers, I want to remind everybody today that our show is sponsored by Jock Market. Jock Market is putting a unique twist on daily fantasy sports. They have turned it into a stock exchange. So forget waiting until the end of the game to make your money. At Jock Market, you can buy and sell shares of your players in real time for real money with guaranteed payouts for all shares at the end of each night. With daily markets for MLB, soon to be NHL, NFL, NBA, almost here, and PGA winding down, you can make real money across the gamut. Utilize the pregame IPO to pick up shares of your favorite players, then buy, sell, or hold during the game based upon your analysis. Download the app to get started. Use our exclusive Awesemo promo code Awesemo for up to a $50 bonus on your first deposit. They will match you dollar for dollar up to those first $50. Jump on in there and get ready. We do have projections and some content specific for their site as well available here. So check that out. It is a lot of fun. All right, Terry, sort of let's quickly hit the bargain pitchers here because it's going to vary by site. So we have Michael Wacha, 81 on DK, 85 on FanDuel. Just say no, but 25 on Yahoo. Yeah, put him in your lineups. He has gone at least 5 innings, I think, in 9 of his last 10 starts. I don't know what FanDuel was thinking there. Paul Blackburn, who is the Paul Blackburn of the night? Well, my God, it could be Paul Blackburn going against Texas. 6,000 on DraftKings, 7,000 on FanDuel, 25 again on Yahoo. And then you have Ian Anderson. This is more of a DK only, 6,600 on DK going against Miami. 7,800 on FanDuel and 40 on Yahoo. Just kind of waving him off on that one. There are better on both the other two sites. There are better options in a similar salary standpoint here. But anything there jump out for you on this one?
I mean, I think Anderson
amongst those discount dandies.
Yeah, to me, Anderson's the guy who really needs to be talked about here. DK 6,600. He's pulling nearly 50% ownership over there. It's a great spot going up against the Marlins. I'm just a little concerned around the depth and just, some of the quality that he's shown on the season. So it's not necessarily a spot where I'm saying that we want to smash and go to a ton of Marlins bats against him, but it's a kid who's making his third start back after a long injury that saw him miss most of July and August. He went 5 2/3 in his on the 29th against the Giants, but then he didn't get out of the 4th against the Rockies at Coors Field last week. It's Coors Field, yeah, but he issued 4 walks, gave up 5 hits, 2 home runs, didn't strike out a single hitter in either of those 2 starts. So that's over 9 2/3 innings, has not struck anybody out yet since he's come back from the injured list. So a little bit concerning there. It was I think a shoulder thing, if memory serves, and shoulders always concern
shoulder
me.
Inflammation. About 5 weeks, it knocked him out. He did have 4 rehab starts in the minors. Did get up to 90 pitches in one of those. So perhaps he's just run into some bad luck. And as you mentioned, Coors Field, the 0 strikeouts a little bit concerning. On this one, but still a talented pitcher. That's where for me it's DK only. I would be shocked if he goes more than 5 innings. I think 4 is reasonable against the Marlins, but you're going to need some strikeouts to make it work. So that's one of those where I'm a little tentative on.
Yeah, and you're talking about a kid, I mean, with the concerns from the last 2 games, not striking anybody out. And overall, he's a good pitcher. He's a good young prospect, and he's been pitching fairly well on the season. But overall, a 22.2% strikeout rate is not gigantic. It's around the league average. 10.2% walk rate is also really concerning. 9.7% barrel rate, 39.9% hard hit. So he's somewhat targetable for sequential hitting, for run creation. Building out 150 lineups, I would be under the field on that DK mark on Anderson shares. And I think I would have more than the field of the Marlins just because they're not getting touched. So you can go to that without getting overly aggressive in terms of stacking up some of the opposition and just trying to wipe out 50% of the field in case they go off, in case they connect on a couple home runs, a little bit of upside here. Maybe it's a spot where you're grabbing 2-man and 3-man stacks. Maybe it's a spot where you grab just a few 5-mans. But everybody on the team is under 1% ownership. So I think you can get there. They're super cheap. It makes some sense to me. That said, I do think Anderson, from a point per dollar kind of a perspective, like he's a lock for cash in this spot. I think it's a no-brainer for cash. But the ownership concerns me for tournament play, despite the friendly price, despite the spectacular matchup. Marlins are one of the worst teams in baseball. And be aware of that if you do go to this stack. You're stacking up a team with a 25.2% strikeout rate against righties, create runs 20% worse than average, 2.56% home run rate, and a 126 ISO. Not a good baseball club. So, the safer thing to do maybe is to undercut Anderson and stay away from Marlins bats. If you want to get aggressive in tournaments, I think you can get to Marlins stacks here.
Okay, so I did call up his game log. His last major league start was July 11th. He was out for just over 3 weeks, and then he made 4 rehab starts for the Gwinnett Stripers, not to be confused with producer Tyler's Fans Only Strippers account. We have in these, he went 40, let's get on the pitches here, 47 pitches in that first one. He had 2 strikeouts, 64 pitches in the second, 3 strikeouts, 76 pitches in the third, 6 strikeouts in his final, 90 pitches, 9 strikeouts. So this could just be an aberration. It's worth noting, but I know the other guys were kind of pushing it hard because it is surprising to see a pitcher of his caliber get 0 strikeouts in 2 starts. But that's where it lands on DraftKings only.
And when we look at those rehab starts, something worth noting is that they are lower leverage at bats for these talented major league pitchers. And Anderson is a guy who has progressed out of being a AAA level pitcher. So he's outshining those kids in terms of his quality in general, or, some of those guys are 35 when I call them kids, but Anderson is better. He's at a higher talent level. So getting through 90 pitches in AAA, getting through a 9-10 strikeout game in AAA, it is worth noting. And the general progression of the pitch count is the most important thing there, I think. But I do think there is a little bit to be said about, the efficiency with which he might be able to pitch at AAA versus the efficiency with which he might be able to pitch against a major league team. That said, the Marlins are like a AAA team, so maybe it all comes out in the wash.
All right. Only 2 others on my list. Adrian Hauser, boy, seems to struggle to get to 5 innings. But didn't he have a complete game last? I believe in his last start, he went like 9 innings or 8 innings, if I'm remembering correctly. I was on the road, so I was just glued in a little box score watching. Like, how the hell did that happen? The true slice,
I remember there was a night where I didn't have him, and I was like, I should have had him. He's a pitcher.
And then you go look at his game log, and you're like, oh, that's why I didn't have him.
Yeah. Oh, I know why I didn't get him. I rarely ever get to him, but yeah.
So he's going against Cleveland, kind of a meh on that one. And then you got Jordan Montgomery, a little pricey on DK, 9,400, but 87 on FanDuel, 38 on Yahoo. How are you feeling about your Jordan Montgomery playing in his getting to sleep in his own bed? Can we say that for those that are in New York? But he's playing over there in whatever they're calling Citi Field these days. Doesn't have to face the DH. How are you feeling about Jordan Montgomery? He's someone I always get wrong.
Yeah, I don't get Montgomery that right all that often. He's progressed for me, I think, based on his season, from a guy that I used to say not necessarily a DFS pitcher, but an okay quality type pitcher too. He's at least a usable DFS pitcher, 23.4% strikeout rate on the season. The walks are a little bit too much, 7.7%, but not tragic there. Induces a nice 13.3% swinging strike rate, maybe throws a few too few called strikes, 28.5% CSW on the whole. Is decent with contact, 7.3% barrel rate, 36% hard hit rate. He's somewhat of a safe pitcher in a lot of spots. He's going up against the Mets lineup with the active roster, has a 145 ISO against lefties, a 3.49 home run rate, create runs 2% worse than average, strike out 23.8% of the time, all right around the league average, slightly below league average. So I think it's a relatively safe spot for Montgomery. I question the overall upside of his ability to strike, to approach like a 10 strikeout game, a massive strikeout game. But outside of maybe Molly and a really good night Urias and Robbie Ray, I don't know that we've got those 10 strikeout starts on the board. And you're picking up that more than you need in the difference just in the ownership here. And you get a little bit of a price savings from some of those guys to Monty. So I can definitely take some shares of Jordan Montgomery, under 10% owned on DK at a somewhat inflated price, under 5% at a fair price on FanDuel. I can get to him here.
All right. Reminder, guys, we're going to get out of here in about 12 minutes. We have the college football live before lock coming on with Matt Gajeski and Ben Raza. 4-game slate tonight. You'll want to keep your eyes open for that one. We have, I think we had 3 different NFL shows in the can today. You had Steve Buzzard, who did a show there talking a little Yahoo. You had Alex and Josh Engelman covering some FanDuel and DraftKings. Alex Baker, the Colts, Steve Buzzard. Oh, those guys are participating tonight in the DraftKings MLB World Baseball Championship. It's going to be a good one. Check that one out. We'll be following along on Twitter and rooting for them. You guys want to get in on the baseball action, use the promo code MLB Live Before Lock, get you 25% off a 1-week MLB package. And then we also are basically giving away the NFL Express package, just $1 for the next couple days. We're giving it away for $1. It's promo code DAC. You get the NFL Express weekly pass. We have added to this. You get player ownerships and rankings. So this isn't the exact number, but you're getting the rankings. So it's pretty helpful. Pretty much in baseball, the top 5 or so players are each going to be owned around 30%. It just helps you put them in order. It's a magnitude where Alex said, you know what? I want people to come home for cheap and just be able to put together some fighting lineups there. So we offer this in baseball, basketball, and football. Football, it also has all of our showdown projections as well. So you get that.
Full projection.
We've full projections for showdown. And we've added the DK tiers content. Yeah. Darn you, Alex. That was a honey hole for me for the last couple of years. We're now going to tell people how to play these? Shame. For shame, Alex. Giving this away for just
more free money from EMAC for everybody. Go get it.
Promo code DAC gets you that for $1. Moving on to our stacks here. Oh, go ahead.
Real quick. Let me chime in real quick on 2 things. One, for people who are looking at the Express package, after you've signed up at the site, we've heard you. We're going to make those things a little bit easier to find on the site. But if you go to the NFL menus and you just look for anything with Express in brackets next to it, and it's about halfway down when you open up the DFS tab, you have a Data Central hub. That's basically like a hub for all the information you're going to be looking for the different rankings, the ownership rankings, and everything that comes with the Express. So that's a great starting point for anybody looking for where their Express content might be. And we're going to improve that a little bit. We've heard your feedback. So just wanted to tell people out there who might be listening. And secondly, question for you. Did we not touch on Carlos Rodon? And did you take him out of your player pool?
I waved him off. I don't know how much they're going to go with him. He did not he was skipped in his turn. They didn't put him on the DL or probably the injured list, but
shoulder issue.
Is there a reason for them to push him too hard? What does that mean? 70, 75 pitches. I'm okay with that. We could see him go 90 if everything's smoothly. It's just one of those where he doesn't compare to Robbie Ray. And frankly, this is heresy because normally I wouldn't, but I'd rather have Framber Valdez with the here they are, here they're not strikeout potential than risk paying up for Carlos Rodon tonight and maybe only getting 2/3 of a normal workload. So I sort of just took him out of my. He'll be a 5%er.
That's what I saw. We still have him highly ranked on the site, and it's one of the points on which I've maybe diverged more all year long than what we're seeing on the site. I am really expecting a limited appearance from Carlos Rodon here. They have treated him with kid gloves in the past. He's had major injury concerns in the past. They already shut him down for a week, 10 days over these last 10 days, missed a start in the rotation. Before that, he had made 3 straight starts of only 5 innings. Before those 3, he made 2 straight starts of only 4 innings. So he's already been limited. They're 10 games up in the division.
I was just pulling that up. They're 10 games ahead of Cleveland. They've got this darn near wrapped up. Knocking on wood for Ducky.
My friend Ducky, much more valuable to this team in October than he is in a random September start against the Red Sox. That on top of it, you're throwing them up against a team that they've somewhat underperformed against lefties, but this is still a powerful lineup with a ton of big time righty bats in it. They don't need to do a lot of damage here to him to, if they hit 1-2 home runs, score a couple of runs. If he's only pitching 5 innings, that's enough to take him out of consideration here. So it doesn't even need to be a spectacular offense. And they don't strike out that much. 21.3% strikeout rate on the season against lefties. He's a very good strikeout pitcher, but they create runs better than average. They don't strike out that much. I am concerned about the spot for Rodon. I think he's going way, way over-owned. I'm concerned with where we've got him ranked on the top pitchers too, to be quite honest.
All right, looking at the top stacks here, I'm just going to throw some out here. We got about 7 minutes to go here. I'll let you hit on the high notes of anybody. But Toronto going against Chris Ellis. Ellis was claimed off the scrap heap. Yeah, he's been nice through 12 innings with Baltimore. I think they picked him up after he got released because he struck out like 6 of them and is, hey, thank you for your time. Before we release you, we're giving you 1 start there. I believe he was with Kansas City prior to that. But he's only got 4 strikeouts in those innings. This is a disaster spot for him. You got Tampa Bay going against Tyler Alexander, a lefty, not to be confused with Tyler Anderson, also a lefty. Can't wait till I screw that one up next year or perhaps later this year. You've got Kansas City going against Griffin Jacks. I think that's a good spot. I think the 4.5 implied run total is not high enough, but I would stay away from Adalberto Mondesi this is a lost season for him. He is not running. He's been on the injured list, I think, 3 separate times. His timing is just all off. They're batting him 6th. Even at the beginning of the season, I forget if it was elbow or shoulder, they had him batting at the bottom of the lineup. This is a lost season. Yeah, he's usually a guy who's going to be leading the league in stolen bases. That's not happening right now. Whit Merrifield, I think, is really good. He hadn't stolen bases in a while. He has 2 in his last 3 games, and he's trying to chase back Starling Marte, who has like 21 stolen bases in his 33 games as an athletic,
leading the league in like 150 fewer plate appearances over Merrifield too.
Been pretty wild there. Yeah. You've got Minnesota going against Daniel Lynch. Lynch has struggled. He's a rookie lefty. Even though they traded away a lot of their teams, you got Minnesota still pretty good against lefties. Cincinnati, we got going against John Lester. What the hell happened to John Lester? 3 straight starts, not allowing like 1 earned run per each start. Mirage. He's on the Matt Harvey plan. Regression's coming hard. And then you got Seattle and Arizona facing each other, fellow lefties that are not that great. Both of those teams are better against lefties. Shout out to Mitch Haniger, who missed the better part of 2 seasons after rupturing his testicle on a foul ball that came off the plate, got up and got him in the golden tee, shall we say? And then he wasn't wearing a cup that day. So yikes. He has been phenomenal. He is clearly an all-star for the Mariners, and he's really good. So he's my home run call of the night. I don't like any of those pitchers under any circumstances. On the late slate, you could maybe get on the 2-pitcher sites about 20% of Mad Bum or about 20% of Marco Gonzalez. They are not great, but your upside is probably a quality start, or perhaps not an implosion or spontaneous combustion on the mound. Talk for about 3 or 4 minutes here on the stacks you like. Hint, we only have 3 or 4 minutes, Terry. Set that internal clock and go.
So, a lot of those stacks you named toward the top of the board here, absolutely, definitely interesting for their spots, for their offensive upside. The issue with several of those teams, they're getting negative leverage. Specifically, Milwaukee, massively negatively leveraged on the DK slate. Toronto, top of the board in terms of probability of success, but negatively leveraged on DK, negatively leveraged on FanDuel. I actually wrote them up earlier because they were pulling positive leverage, and the ownership has just kind of really swung that direction. So there's definitely a little bit of a risk of just kind of walking hand in hand with the field on those 2 teams on the top of the board. The Diamondbacks crept into my article today because they're ranked 3rd on our board. Kind of surprised the hell out of me, but they're getting a little positive leverage on both sites. Maybe they're somewhat interesting, somewhat sneaky. It's not a team that I don't think I've written up all season long. So like I said, it was a big surprise to me, but they're pulling decent little home run marks, not getting a ton of ownership. Individually, if you look at some of the hitters that I'd want to get to from this lineup, though, Ketel Marte, Carson Kelly, maybe a little Christian Walker, those are the guys where the ownership is falling. So guys like Andy Young, guys like Pavin Smith toward the back end of the lineup maybe are a little bit interesting. You get a little Nick Ahmed up at the top, although he's drawing ownership for cheap on DK. It's an interesting spot going up against the Mariners here. So I'm curious to see how that one works out. They're highly ranked on our board, coming through a little bit more on our board than they are for me in my personal model. But I believe in the call there. I think it's an interesting spot with not enough ownership. And then what I really like to do on a slate like this is take our top stacks tool and just kind of scroll down a few. Because if you look at the top of the board is Toronto, looking at the DK board, 12% probability of being the top stack. Arizona's second at a 7. And then you scroll all the way down, you can go down to like Boston is ranked like 13th. The Dodgers are ranked like 14th, somewhere in that neighborhood, I'm estimating here. And those guys are at 2. So we're 2.7. So we're talking about less than a 5% percentage point difference between like the 2nd ranked team and the 13th ranked team. It's a relative plateau. So I like just scrolling down the board and looking for some of these high-end offenses that are coming in at positive leverage. And you get a whole list of them here. You get Philly, you get Philly's average, but you get Atlanta, you get Houston, you get Oakland, you get the Yankees, you get Boston, you get LA. A lot of those teams coming in with positive leverage and all fairly distributed in terms of their probability of success. So I like just looking at a lot of just the good baseball teams available on this slate and kind of playing them. It seems somewhat simplistic, but it really makes sense on a day when a lot of these teams are looking pretty equal. There's enough pitching to move around the board, a lot of low-owned pitching that we like. You can put together some of the more popular plays, some of the more expensive plays that aren't getting that much ownership in terms of bats. So I like getting to that range on the board here. The Braves were the team that I did the full write-up on. They're still pulling positive leverage, ton of power in that spot. I really like the situation for Atlanta, so I'm going to be going to them a little bit heavier.
All right.
How to do on time?
That's pretty good. We'll do some home run calls. I see somebody in chat asking Nelson Cruz or Teoscar Hernandez. Nelson Cruz tonight, but you keep Teoscar Hernandez in the back of your mind, especially when they're facing lefties. He has some eye-popping numbers. He's pretty good against righties as well. Not a lot of name recognition. Really good on Yahoo, especially where he generally sits in the $20 to $23 salary range. I think on that cheapies in that same game, Manny Margot, Jordan Luplow, I see somebody brought up in chat. I've got the Mitch Haniger, Ketel Marte. Remember me games on both sides? They were traded for each other way back in the day. But both those guys are legitimately good against lefties. I think Kyle Seager also in play, especially on the late slate. He has 34 home runs, which is a career high. He's 5 RBI away from his career high there. Not too bad for his 10th season. That is Corey's brother. And then Adam Duvall, also in a Remember Me game there, going against the Marlins. Who's your home run calls for the night? And then we're going to turn this over to Matt Gajewski and Ben Arasa.
Yeah, so you nailed a lot of the top of my board here in terms of like the top 20 or so on my home run board. Just looking at my model, I've got Teoscar to answer that person's question. I've got Teoscar 14. I've got Nelson Cruz 12. They are very similar, though. We're talking about a minor difference between the two. My call in my article, I would have gone a different direction if I had known his ownership was going to go up to where it is, but it was Christian Yelich. Seems somewhat obvious, but he's struggled throughout the year. Only 8 home runs, pretty lousy.
Does he have a negative launch angle at this point?
He might. He absolutely might. He's also only barreling the ball 8.6% of the time, still making 50.9% hard contact, though, which I really like. Still walks 14.9% of the time, too. So if you roster him, you get him on base at least a few times, potential to score a few runs, not give you a negative or, not give you a 0 in your lineup. So I do like making those types of calls sometimes and at least getting something out of the play. Other guys that look somewhat interesting, some of the Royals, Sal Perez. I do get a little bit of a number on Adalberto Mondesi, despite what you were saying before. So a little bit of a home run potential from him. Some historic data in there too, though, because he's got such a short sample this season. Ton of the Brewers, ton of the Blue Jays up toward the top. Matt Olson always in his traditional spot up toward the top.
All right, so we're going to get on out of here, but our next show kicks off 17 hours of not exactly commercial free DFS content over the next 48. Shout out to Terry jumping on in here, letting me have a fun show in my I'm Back show. Remember Me, my Remember Me show. Thank you, producer Tyler. With that, gamers, good luck.